The hip-hop world is being rocked to its core by the recent arrest of Camron and Jim Jones, the monarchs of Dipset, after a nasty incident backstage. Was it about past grudges, money, or something much more sinister? You might be surprised too. Learn the truth. Chaos and controversy have been the foundation of these two's empires for years, but now they have gone too far. Is a complete disintegration of all they have stood for, not just a street fight. The twist is that nobody even expected the battle to occur, and you won't believe the details we've unearthed. Keep listening, because what you're about to hear will lead you to reconsider all of your preconceived notions about these legendary hip-hop artists. Trust me, nobody anticipated this tale. The entire hip-hop scene and the rest of the world are in disbelief over what transpired behind closed doors, which was intended to be just another celebration and night of living the high life for Camron and Jim Jones. Unimaginable actions and betrayal are being exposed, and the consequences could permanently ruin Dipset. Let's set the scene. Jim Jones, the fiery, unrepentant man who has always been in trouble, and Camron, the self-proclaimed king of Harlem, were supposed to be enjoying their positions at the top and earning money, but this night would be different. The outcome of their relationship would affect the industry for years to come. The two were at a high-profile business event, and it started like any other night, with their faces plastered all over the VIP area. Smiles, bottles exploding, and everything on display. However, behind the scenes, although they were once the foundation of Dipset and a power couple, there has always been a simmering tension beneath the glitz and celebrity that no one has ever completely understood. These two haven't exactly had the smoothest of relationships. Before long, the two were arguing backstage, and this was not a minor argument. Rather, it was something far more serious. The world was left in a state of uncertainty when their verbal disagreement turned into a full-fledged physical altercation, which went beyond simple insults. Money, power, and ego. The same trifecta that has ruined so many people before them finally caught up with them, revealing that the fractures had been there all along. To completely comprehend how things got out of hand so fast, let's take a moment to reflect. The collaboration between Camron and Jim Jones and Dipset was never entirely straightforward. They experienced highs and lows, as well as, of course, their memorable moments. What could have caused such a confrontation, and were they prepared for the total mayhem that ensued? But if you examine their careers in detail, you will realize that underneath all of their achievements, there has always been a deep-seated tension that simmers just below the surface. There will undoubtedly be ego conflicts and divergent outlooks on the future. But the money and the shady game of who gets what, who controls the situation, and who pulls the strings were the main causes. Nobody becomes as famous as Camron and Jim Jones without stomping on a few toes, and that's exactly what occurred right from the start. Despite their respective roles within Dipset, it was clear that the two guys each had objectives. Jim Jones was eager to forge a path and leave a legacy, while Camron wanted to maintain control of the organization. Though they had always been able to work things out when they fought, something had changed this time, and the stakes were higher than ever. Which is when things started to go out of control. The truth is that neither man has ever been at sharing the spotlight. Both men wanted to be at the top. The stakes were attention, drama, and fame, and it felt like a game. But it was different this time. Let us revisit the night of the well-known altercation. Imagine the scene, the lights, the cameras, the electric tension in the air. The flashing fans' cameras filming the night as everyone tries to get the perfect shot or moment. But Camron and Jim Jones weren't quite right. They lost their customary friendliness, and after exchanging a few words, the altercation turned into the kind of brawl you only see in movies. The fight swiftly escalated from heated to outright explosive as the verbal attacks persisted. Within seconds, the altercation escalated into something much more serious, with Camron apparently pushing Jim Jones, sending everyone in the backstage area running for protection. The two had already turned by the time security arrived, so it was too late. Bottles, chairs, and equipment flew as the battle heated backstage into a combat zone. However, this was no ordinary fight-o. No, it was a full-fledged altercation between two individuals who had built an empire together over the years. And now it appeared that we were finally noticing the flaws that everyone else had missed. Punches were thrown, bodies crashed into walls, people screamed. And the sounds of turmoil echoed throughout the venue, making the brutality almost unthinkable. However, it was more than simply a fight. This was the end of a period, one of the most dramatic splits in hip-hop history. And the public's response was even more legends abound about Camron and Jim Jones's backstage altercation. Every fan, critic, and business insider had an opinion, with reactions. But once the word got out, both critics and admirers were shocked by what they were hearing. How is that possible? How could two of the game's most well-known figures be so antagonistic toward one another? In the blink of an eye, were they truly prepared to sacrifice everything for a backstage altercation? Let's examine what led to the radical turn against one another of two individuals who were once so close that they were nearly one and the same. The solution, as we quickly discovered, was far more profound than a casual insult or a breakdown in temper. The public didn't know that the altercation was just the beginning of what was happening behind the scenes. If you know anything about their background, you will know that the drama between Camron and Jim Jones had been simmering for years, like a powder keg waiting to blow. Behind the gloss and glamour of Dipset, there was always an underlying tension. They put on a united front, and their cooperation was among the most successful in hip-hop. Both of them were enormous celebrities who were driven for success and jealously guarded their traditions. Problems are bound to arise when two massive egos are in the same organization. But it wasn't just the egos that led to the breakdown. It was also the money, power, and business. Let's begin by discussing the business aspect of the situation. Camron, the group's brain, had always made choices, but Jim Jones, with his fiery personality and larger-than-life persona, wasn't content. With being the second in command, their financial empire wasn't as solid as they thought. He desired his own room, his own power, and possibly, most importantly, his own piece of the action. All sorts of issues come to the surface when money is involved. And when Jim's own career took off, it became clear that he wasn't satisfied with being Camron's right-hand man. While Camron had ideas for the future, he was more than eager to battle for vision and goals. Future Jim Jones began to protest, doubting Camron's choices and his place in the group. Tension between the two only grew as the pressure began to mount. Then rumors circulated that Camron was preparing to go it alone, that Jim Jones was being ejected from Dipset, and that there were transactions being made behind closed doors that Jim had nothing to do with. The public became aware that the two were rarely seen together and that the previous chemistry and brotherhood had disappeared as the fractures began to show. Asterisk, the altercation was the result of months or possibly years of simmering anger rather than a single incident. Something finally broke when the two men were backstage with fans, staff, and industry people. Jim Jones, his opportunity to take charge. What about the actual battle, the altercation that ultimately came to define this whole story? Respect, and he would not let Camron continue to govern without challenge. Camron, the alpha, had been in command his entire career and wasn't going to let Jim dictate terms. Therefore, he wasn't having any of it. Prior to the insults, the dispute started as a back and forth over business issues. But you have to understand that these weren't just words, they were slashes at their entire identities, and that's when things started to get out of control. They were deeply personal barbs that went beyond the usual, he's a sellout or he's a snake. Intensified before someone intervened, and Camron is accused of pushing Jim Jones, sending him flying backward. Camron's fists started flying as the argument swiftly turned into a full-on fight in that one instant. It wasn't just a backstage brawl. It was the end of Dipset as we knew it. Gym security showed up, but it was too late. But the mayhem didn't end there. Both males were arrested following the altercation. You read correctly, the same men who had formerly dominated the hip-hop scene were now incarcerated. As soon as the news emerged, the arrest itself was a spectacle, with cameras flashing everywhere, reporters scrambling to obtain statements, and fans posting their comments on social media. But it was the shock of it all, not just the arrest, that got people talking. Who would have thought that Jim Jones and Camron, the same street-running superstars, would be arrested in 2023 and now be subject to legal action? Now that the dust has settled and the streets are trying to make sense of what happened that night, the drama really begins. Fans are in shock as the full ramifications of Camron and Jim Jones' altercation begin to surface. They are questioning whether the legend of Dipset is really over or whether the bond that bound these two men together can be restored. It was a shocking turn in a long-running story that nobody saw coming for a backstage fight. The fallout, however, was only beginning. Although the outcome of this chaotic chapter is unpredictable, the shockwaves are already being felt widely. First, the legal ramifications. Both Camron and Jim Jones were taken into custody, and while the charges differ based on the source, there is no question that was a full-fledged confrontation involving numerous individuals, security, and witnesses, rather than only a backstage altercation. The audience began filming on their phones as soon as the altercation heated up, and YouTube eventually featured the footage. Caused a media sensation, but many individuals might not be aware that the charges that followed caused more harm than the arrest itself. The venue itself apparently had to cope with serious property damage during the fight, and there were rumors of assault, property damage, and the potential for a lawsuit. In high-profile situations like this, litigation can grow quickly, as we all know, so both of their legal teams worked feverishly to limit the harm. There is currently no assurance that the charges will remain valid. However, let's face it, their reputations will suffer irreversible harm even if it is withdrawn. Once bearing the burden of an entire movement, these two men are now embroiled in a public crisis that is challenging to settle. But what about the financial fallout? The legal ramifications were just one part of the story we cannot overlook. The fact that Camron and Jim Jones have been artists and brand builders for years, earning millions of dollars, but their investments and collaborations are now in danger. Record labels, corporate sponsors, and business associates are already several sponsors have already cut ties with Camron and Jim Jones, according to people familiar with the situation. According to one unnamed source, a big apparel company that had previously collaborated with Jones was reviewing their agreement in the wake of the arrest. Camron, who is well known for his many business endeavors, might undergo a radical change. They have invested in the Jim Jones, Camron, and Dipset brands. But who is prepared to support them now that both guys are being dragged through the mud? Restructuring of his financial empire. But because this is where things get really fascinating, let's talk about the fans. The public's reaction to this has been, to put it bluntly, combustible in the era of social media, when everything is enlarged and scrutinized in real time. Once praising Dipset's strength and solidarity, fans are now split. Some are rooting for their favorite member, while others are calling on both of them to accept accountability for their deeds. Now that Dipset's formerly impregnable history is being questioned, some are beginning to question whether the dynasty is breaking up. However, if their favorite rappers can make this situation better, there's a chance that many people will forgive them and keep supporting them. There are the die-hard Dipset supporters who have been with Camron and Jim Jones from the beginning. They seek answers and are distraught, irate, and perplexed. They are curious as to why their heroes are engaged in such activities. They are unable to accept that they are idols. The men who brought them hits, like dips at Anthem and Santé We Fly, High could go from ruling the hip-hop scene to this humiliating event. Social media, which is rife with scathing criticism, memes, and opinion, Pieces about how the clash between Camron and Jim Jones was long coming is where those who view as the final straw are choosing to vent. Some fans have even gone so far as to declare that this marks the end of an era and the symbolic demise of hip-hop's traditional period. Even though these two will always be renowned in their own right, their love has been tarnished, and this scandal will always hang over them like a shadow in the entertainment business. He moves quickly and is already considering the next great project. Will this scandal plague Camron and Jim Jones for the rest of their lives? Or will they be able to recover their careers? Although it's too soon to say, one thing is for sure, the media and public will continue to keep a careful eye on everything they do. When the dust settles and both men are forced to confront their repercussions, that will be the true test. Everyone is now anticipating what Jim Jones and Camron will do next. Once the public trust is restored, there won't be any going back. But we can expect a frenzy of interviews, media appearances, and perhaps even an apology tour. The drama may still take unexpected turns, and the ramifications from this backstage altercation are far from over. We'll be here to report on it as usual. Pet will never be the same though, because of the drama, the scandal, and the betrayal that will surround these two individuals for years to come. Although both guys would have to put in a lot of effort to rebuild, it's uncertain if they'll be able to relive the enchantment that initially made them famous. Here are the startling specifics of Camron and Jim Jones' altercation backstage, the aftermath, and everything in between. But this is only the beginning of a tale that has the potential to alter hip-hop's trajectory and undermine the reputations of two heavyweights of the genre. How do you feel about Dipset right now? Can Camron and Jim Jones get past their backstage altercation and turn things around? Let's keep informed about the most recent developments in this major controversy. Please leave your thoughts in the comments box below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so that we can keep you updated on any new developments. Let's be informed about all the controversies, inner drama, and exclusive news that you won't find anywhere else. Don't forget to click the notification bell. Keep in mind that this is only the beginning. There is more to come. Will Jim Jones and Camron be able to rise above this catastrophe? Is it going to get worse from here, or do you think they can bounce back? Please share your opinions in the comments section below. If we read them all, you won't want to miss the incredible disclosures, shocking exposes, and never-before-seen video that are on the horizon.